The first known owners of Oak Park, then called Painestown, were the Cooke family, later known as Cooke. The family lived at Oak Park from the middle of the 1600s until 1785 and were related to Edward Cooke, Lord Chief Justice of England. The most famous Cooke from Painestown was Matthew, who was a colonel in the army of King James. And a well-known descendant was the late Cardinal Cooke of New York. In 1785, the Earl of Kenmare, husband of Anne Cooke, the last member of the Cooke family, sold Oak Park to Henry Bruen. Having made his fortune in America, he returned to Ireland and proceeded to buy up land in Carlow and surrounding counties. In a short time, he had purchased over 10,000 hectares, all or part of 13 parishes in Carlow alone. The original Henry Bruen was the first of 5 Henry Bruens to own Oak Park up to 1957, as the estate was passed down from father to son. The Bruens of Oak Park were one of the most influential families in the country. The first Henry Bruen was a member of the Irish Parliament in Dublin, and the following 2 were MPs in Westminster. The Bruens further strengthened their position by intermarrying with other powerful families in Leinster, including the Kavanaghs of Borris and the Connollys of Castletown. There is evidence that a house of some substance existed in Painestown prior to 1800. In 1815, the house was described as a neat edifice, but not extensive, what would be described as a fashionable hunting lodge in the English style. The second Henry Bruen decided to embellish it and commissioned well-known designer William V. Morrison to design and construct a villa around the existing building. Morrison was probably introduced to Henry Bruen by his in-laws, the Kavanaghs, whose home Morrison had recently designed. In 1878, the house was enlarged to designs produced by architects McCurdy and Mitchell for the third Henry Bruen. In 1902, during the occupancy of the fourth Henry Bruen, the house was badly damaged by fire but was subsequently reconstructed and improved. Located on the boundary of the Bruen property, the Grand Arch was the main entrance to the Oak Park estate. The arch was also a William Morrison design and was constructed at the same time as Oak Park House. This structure is the best example in existence of a Morrison-designed grand entrance. It contains living accommodation for a gatekeeper and was occupied until 1970. East of Oak Park House, there is a cast iron bridge which spans a man-made lake at its narrowest point. It was designed by George Papworth and constructed in 1819. Papworth was a well-known architect in Dublin at that time, being responsible for the design of the Pro Cathedral and Kingsbridge near the present Euston train station. The Oak Park Bridge was one of the first cast-iron bridges constructed outside of Dublin and is supported by ornate granite piers at both sides. It was located on the main entrance road to Oak Park House. Just north of Oak Park House is a raised mound surrounded by tall beech trees. Beneath this lies the Ice House, an egg-shaped underground chamber constructed around 1810, which served as a storage area for ice collected from the lake. The Ice House is 6 metres deep and 4 metres wide and is lined with bricks. Before the era of refrigeration, it was the only means of keeping meat and other perishable foods fresh for any length of time. Oak Park Lake, comprising in the region of 8 hectares, is man-made. Every large estate house needed a lake to enhance its status. If one did not exist, it had to be constructed. The lake provided ice for the Ice House, ducks for shooting parties, as well as a skating rink for their family and guests in winter. A 2-storey granite ashlar building is located in the Farmyard. The building was used as a dairy for making butter and processing milk during the Bruen era. The building has been confirmed as a Morrison design. Across the road from this building is the Farmyard complex. Constructed in the early years of the 19th century, it was the centre of all farming activities on the estate. The farm steward's house was an integral part of the farmyard. Adjacent to the farmyard is an old graveyard containing the ruins of an ancient chapel. Within the walls of the chapel are buried some of the Cooke family, who resided in Oak Park before 1800. The last burial in this graveyard took place in the early 1940s. The origins of the church are unknown, but it is most likely that it was a church of worship for the landlords and tenants. One of the oldest structures on the estate is the coach house, which was built around 1800. One wing housed the stables for the horses. The other wing and the centre section, with recessed facade, accommodated the carriages. There was a residence at the rear, probably occupied by the head groom. The other grooms and horsemen lived upstairs, sleeping over the horses to stay warm. Around 1900, a gas-producing plant was installed in this building, which supplied gas for lighting in the main house. One of the most well-known buildings in Oak Park is the Temple. It was commissioned by Henry Bruen II in 1841 and designed by architect John B. Keane in the style of a Greek temple. It was intended as a memorial to Bruen's win over young Daniel O'Connell in the English Parliament elections of 1841. Shortly afterwards, Bruen died, and although the cut stone for the completion of the temple was on site, it was never finished. The partially constructed temple was later used as a mausoleum, and the last two Henry Bruens and their wives are buried there. A school and church existed on the Oak Park estate going back to the middle of the 1800s. The school provided education for children of workers of all denominations and probably predated any formal schooling system in the country. The Painestown Church, as it was called, was for the use of the family and their employees. Regular church services were held there, and there are many reports of colourful Bruen weddings held there in the late 1800s. Both buildings have now disappeared. The last one to go was the schoolhouse, which was burnt down in the mid-1980s. Various factors caused a rapid decline in the powers of the Bruens and other landlords towards the end of the 19th century. Firstly, the Ballot Act of 1872 introduced the secret ballot, and for the first time, tenants could vote against their landlords without fear of reprisal. Following on from that, the British government introduced a number of land acts, which in effect gave the tenants the power to buy out their holdings. Although over 200 mansions were burned down during this period, Oak Park House was fortunate to escape. The Bruen family's 175-year occupancy at Oak Park finally came to an end when the fifth and last Henry Bruen died without a male heir in 1954. He had been estranged for many years from his wife, Gladys McClintock, and daughter Patricia, and willed the entire estate to his first cousin, Francis Bruen, to maintain the family name. Francis was the son of Admiral Edward Francis Bruen and had been born and reared in England. A bitter legal battle developed between Francis Bruen and Henry Bruen's daughter Patricia, who had been left a paltry amount of just £300 a year. To settle this dispute, the Oak Park estate was sold in 1957 to an English farming syndicate, Browns Hill Farms, who already controlled substantial lands in the area. The furniture and contents of the house were disposed of at a clearance auction, and the house was left unoccupied. In 1969, the funeral of Gladys McClintock arrived at Oak Park, unannounced, and she was buried in the temple beside her long-estranged husband, Henry. Browns Hill Farms farmed the lands for a number of years, but Oak Park House remained unoccupied. During the harvests, it was used as a grain store. As a result of poor harvests and local agitation to have the lands divided, the estate was sold to the Irish Land Commission in 1960. In the division that followed, on First Tholuntish, which had just been established as the National Agricultural Institute, was given 344 hectares, including Oak Park House. other parts of the original estate now make up Carlow Golf Club, which had been rented from the Bruen estate for many years, and the playing fields of Carlow Rugby Club. The remaining 182 hectares was divided into small holdings and allocated to farmers by the Land Commission. Oak Park became the National Crops Research Centre, being ideally located in the heart of Ireland's tillage region, and was officially opened by Dr. James Ryan, Minister for Finance, on the 29th of June 1964. The Agricultural Engineering Department was also located at this site. On Forest Taluntish arrived at an opportune time, as an extended period of unoccupation of such a house would have had serious consequences for its future structural security. The ground floor was used for offices and administration functions, while the upper floor and basement were used as laboratories and storage areas. A canteen was also located in the basement. The occupancy and ongoing maintenance of Oak Park House ensured the upkeep and effective use of the facility from the 1960s. In 1988, An Forest Taluntish was amalgamated with ACOT, the Agricultural Advisory and Education Service, to form Teagasc, the Irish Agriculture and Food Development Authority. This made Oak Park one of the primary agricultural research and advisory centres in the country, ensuring the upkeep and effective use of Oak Park House and lands. Because of the changing nature of agricultural research, with the emphasis switching from plot to laboratory studies, it became apparent that the laboratory facilities in Oak Park House were no longer adequate. A number of new state-of-the-art laboratories were constructed on the campus to cater for this change. This happened at an ideal time, as Teagasc head office was relocating from Dublin in 2003, and Oak Park House was deemed the ideal location. Oak Park Estate was the venue for the National Ploughing Championships in 1988, 1989 and 1990, and also the venue for the National and World Ploughing Championships in 1996, attracting visitors from all over the globe. Teagasc has already invested over €1 million in upgrading Oak Park House. In 2005, it leased 48 hectares of woodland to Carlow County Council for development as a public park, which is a major asset for the people of Carlow and the surrounding areas. For more than 300 years, Oak Park Estate has provided vital employment and is still a key employer in the region. By locating its head office in Oak Park House, updating its research infrastructure on the campus, and leasing lands for a public park, Teagasc is ensuring that Oak Park House and the surrounding estate lands will continue to be an integral part of Carlow's future agricultural, commercial and cultural development.